Well, my man, Mr. Zlotnitsky. How are you, buddy?
I am well, Mr. Benoit. I love your name. I've been just saying it just for the fun of it. Benoit.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll
I never understood why it's spelled the way it's spelled, but it sounds awesome.
French. It's French.
Yeah, well, the French,
Oh,
their
well.
weird spelling of things.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Hey, so this is the
Are you
first.
French actually?
Yeah,
Is your
our
yeah,
friend.
are you? Huh.
Yeah.
Okay. I
I'm
did not know
actually a
that.
mutt. I'm
Are you? Okay.
Chinese. I'm Ashkenazi Jew. I am uh I got a ton of Portuguese in me. I got Vietnamese. I got all kinds of stuff.
Like Portuguese water dog or just, no?
Would you like to know?
I don't know. Would I? That sounds kind of scary, but
Yeah, actually,
okay.
you probably wouldn't want to know. So this is the first podcast. So this is our kickoff episode for people to understand what Braving Business is all about and to understand who this illustrious host is, Mr. Zlot.
You speaking about yourself? Oh, you talking about me?
Oh, you. Come on,
Very
I'm the
kind
Ed
of you.
McMahon. I'm the Ed McMahon to this Johnny Carson over here. So
Ed did all right, you know.
he did all right. He did all right. Oh, yeah, I can. Boy, is that aging me and us actually.
Aging us both, my friend.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
So I figured, you know what, on this one, let's introduce people to who you are, why you're doing this awesome concept of a podcast, and we'll just dig a little deep. That's okay with you.
Works for me. Let's do it.
All right, so I'm going to introduce you, kind sir. My co-host and friend, Tal Zlotnitsky, has led a remarkable life, and truly is. Born in Israel, where you're a television star as a child, you came to the U.S. at the age of 12, and for a time, you and your parents were undocumented immigrants, which nuts. You began your entrepreneurial journey with a spectacularly failed painting franchise, which we want to learn more about, when you were a college sophomore. You parlayed that failure into into a career where you've built one after another groundbreaking business. You were the co-founder and CEO of the mobile parking payment pioneer iControl Mobile, sold to Ringo, and now known as Park Mobile, which I believe is in Chicago. So
It's all over. It's all over the country. I think it's all over the world now.
yeah, thanks for taking my money. Um,
My
you've
pleasure.
also co-founded and was the CEO of iControl Data, which is a financial technology firm, which was an early pioneer of a process called pay on scan to speed up and improve the accuracy of transaction settlements between merchants and their vendors. It's now backed by Goldman Sachs, which you facilitated back in 2015, and iControl now today processes billions of dollars in payments each year for tens of thousands of customers. Tal remains a major shareholder and serves on the board of iControl Data, and has also been an investor and board member for more than a dozen other startups, including one which became one of the world's most highly rated travel pillows, Jet Comfy, which I also believe I have one of those, believe it or not.
I hope you do. A lot of people do.
Currently, Tal is a senior principal of global tech consulting firm Infosys, where you are a strategic transformation advisor to Fortune 500 clients. You're also the chairman of the most recent startup, Our Love Company, which is our.love, and the founder and CEO of a still in stealth mode generative AI startup, Breez. Beyond his professional career, Tal has been involved in causes that, of course, you're passionate about, from immigration to the rights of gays and minorities to tax reform, pretty much the whole gamut. You were selected as a member of President Barack Obama's presidential partners in 2009 and spoke on behalf of the president on business and tax policies, including to the White House press on the West Lawn of the White House. You were on policy and steering or on the policy and steering committee of presidential campaign for Pete Buttigieg, and sits on the advisory board of the Muma School of Business at the University of South Florida, which is based in your hometown of Tampa. You have also spoken at numerous rallies, conferences, and events on the topics of equal pay, higher minimum wage, and tax reform, leadership, entrepreneurship, innovation, and leading with courage and purpose in overcoming adversity. Whew, Tal, my friend, my partner, That's quite the life you've led up to now. So I am delighted to interview you for this podcast.
Well, I appreciate being here. This will be my one time that I'm going to be on this side of the desk, and then the rest of it, you and
That's
I will be
great.
talking to some fascinating and interesting people. We'll try to not to bore people to death today, and hopefully they'll keep checking us out.
No, I mean, look, it was a that's a very in-depth bio. Normally we dig more out during the conversations with people that we've had, but it's important for our listeners and our viewers to understand who they're dealing with. You are a badass magnet in your own right. So I think it's really, really cool that we're able to learn a little bit more about you so that people then understand where you're coming from when you're asking questions. So um, I'm thrilled to get into this with you. And actually, just right off the bat, this podcast has been amazing. This is our first one that we're launching, but you and I have had the opportunity to talk with some really fascinating people over the past few weeks. Had a lot of great interviews that we put in the can, which is great. But to be, in full transparency, this is your baby. This is your dream, your idea. You came up with this. I was lucky enough to be someone that you knew that you might want to do this with. So I appreciate being on this journey with you. What made you want to do this? What started this whole idea?
So first of all, PJ, I'm so grateful to you for agreeing to be on this journey with me. The fact that you have been doing this and doing this well and on scale for a long time is a source of great comfort to me because I don't know quite what I'm doing when it comes to being a podcast host. I've been a guest on a lot of podcasts, but and I may have hosted a couple for Our.Love, but this is really new. So having you along with me on this ride is quite comforting.
Oh,
Look, well, I'll give you a chance to acknowledge that. Go ahead, go for it.
Okay. No, thank you, man. Thank you. Seriously, this is a lot of fun. So please go ahead.
Yeah. Look, I have had, as you said, I feel, listening to you, it's hugely humbling to have been on the journey I've been on, coming to this country as an undocumented immigrant at the age of 12, and living through all sorts of experiences that are not unique to me, but are not so pleasant when you're an immigrant and you're coming to a country where you don't speak the language and you don't quite fit in. So fitting in has been, a challenge, and it took me sort of a lifetime to get to a place where I'm fully comfortable in my own skin. And part of the journey for me, having selected the entrepreneurial path, has been the difficulty that I've felt being vulnerable for much of my career and sharing the true experience of entrepreneurship. And as I've aged and matured and learned more about myself and others, I discovered that, as it turns out, my entrepreneurial journey and its challenges were not unique at all. And I wish I'd had some of the wisdom that I've gained both through talking to others and mentorship and experience when I was starting out. And so my goal here was to create a podcast that does not glorify business, but glorifies people and their experience and their humanity and their challenges along the way, with the objective of empowering, inspiring, and motivating people to, if they choose the entrepreneurial path, to do it with confidence, even in the face of challenges and setbacks. And if they're not entrepreneurs, if they're just leaders or people that care about life, that they get something out of this podcast as well, that hopefully inspires them and motivates them to be their best selves. So that's my goal.
I first of all, I think it's awesome, right? It's a fantastic goal. I think that even in the first moments of meeting you some years back, you've always been one that struck me as a natural for mentorship, right? You seem to kind of fit in that role really easily, and I think it's just part of your nature and who you are. And so when you had brought this idea up, I knew that it wasn't going to be something about just glorifying business. You've always been one that has been a lot more deep rooted. Like you tend to think things really, well and holistically. And so I think that approach and that mindset, of course, is going to make a great podcast series moving forward. So very, very, very cool stuff. With you, sir, when you were young and you were in Israel, you were a television star, but you weren't just a television star, you were a singing television star, which I think for a lot of people, I've done a lot of acting in my youth and some into my adulthood, but acting is one thing, singing is another. That takes a different level of putting yourself out there, so to speak, and then to be popular at it. I mean, that of course you must have faced a lot of butterflies. You must have faced a lot of self-doubt, but you persevered through that. Um, taking that and becoming an immigrant in the US and becoming an entrepreneur and this whole this painting business we're going to ask about here in a second. Like, how did those experiences, like, what drives you to have that passion to continuously persist, like in the face of adversity?
Hmm. So first, thank you. It's a great question. I'll start by admitting that I was way too young to fully appreciate the magnitude of being on national television at the age of 7 and 8, and again at 10 and 11, and singing with men and women that were, for the tiny state of Israel, huge superstars. I didn't appreciate it. I don't think I viewed it back then. I do remember some things about the experiences. Obviously, I have videos, but what I mainly remember is the heat of the lights on my face, singing on stage,
Sure.
in different arenas, and the sound of the crowd clapping. Those two memories have lingered. I'd actually say that having had that strange experience, and I was also on Sesame Street for several years in Israel, having had that
That's
that
awesome.
experience of being, very successful very early. When you could argue I had my 15 minutes of fame before I hit puberty. Um,
Watch.
yeah. Um, it has a lot of it taught me a lot, but in hindsight, right? So I came to the US. Naturally, I was complete unknown. I didn't speak the language. I also happened to get here at the age where, a lot of boys don't look so cute, and I was no exception. I went from being a pretty cute little boy to being a not so cute preteen and then teen.
Gangly teen.
Yeah, I wish I was gangly. I was very short. I just had a lot of pimples. Um, but it was a hugely humbling experience to go from where I was to where I found myself. And it taught me a lot. Again, at the time, I think I mostly, as most of us, in moments of great pain and challenge, felt some combination of sorry for myself and overwhelmed with the experience. But in hindsight, it has caused me to be, I think, a more empathetic person, uh, much more interested in people and their experiences and their humanity, um, because I knew exactly what it felt like when people didn't care about mine or didn't treat me as if I mattered. So it taught me a lot about caring about human beings and having connection, which is something that I've more or less carried with me most of my life. I mean, I think I'm better at it now in lots of ways, but it's always been something that I gravitated towards, connection and people. So yeah, I think ultimately my experiences have all come together into who I am today, good, bad, and ugly. And there was plenty of ugly along the way, and I just don't just mean me as a teenager. That's pretty hideous, but beyond, right? Including my first experience in the business world. So there were many moments that were not nearly as fantastic as the bio you read make it seem.
Well, I mean, sure, right? When hindsight tends to give us um a buffer between the pain of the moment and our future selves, right? Like, yeah, there's a lot of ugly that happens, and bios are great, and I think at the end of the day, it's who you are and how you come across and how you treat people, which is the ultimate result and of everything you've gone through. So, you mentioned this early on entrepreneurship. So, like your first business was this painting at when you were in college, painting business.
That's right. Yeah, my first
So,
business of my own. Yeah.
all right. So you call this spectacularly failed. Please.
Well, I think I'm underselling it. It was worse than that. So look, I was finishing up my school year. I was looking for something to do. I needed to make money so that I could stay on campus. I was paying for myself for the most part. My parents helped me some, but they were working class and didn't have a lot of means. And I responded to an ad in the campus paper for a painting franchisee, College Pro Painters. I was selected. I went to King of Prussia, Pennsylvania for a few months every weekend to learn how to do estimates and how to do bids and how to paint and how to hire painters and how to run jobs. And a few months before maybe I think a couple months before the summer started, I started going out there and driving my territory and looking for homes that needed exterior painting. We were an exterior painting company. And also there was some advertising on the radio and things like that. Bottom line was I started doing estimates and I was doing extremely well. I was, I think there were something like 2,400 franchisees around the country, and I was number one in the country in closing at over 80%, which was about 5x. I mean, the overall average was around 20%. And the reason was that at that early point, right before the summer started, before I actually saw the quality of the work that my team produced, I had a certain vision for how well we would do. I would stand outside people's homes, and I really felt that we would do an incredible job, and every caulk line would be perfect, and the scraping would be perfect, and every brush stroke would be perfect. And I sold that. I sold that kind of vision to the people that were buying jobs, and I did very well. And then I had to hire painters, and the summer started, and they sucked. We sucked. They didn't care, right? My painters were college kids. They were getting drunk every night, showing up hungover the next day. They were working slowly. There was not a line that was straight. There was not a caulk line that didn't need to be redone. The scraping was almost always half-ass, and I started feeling enormous shame about the quality of the work. And eventually, at some point, I fired everyone. Every job was running over because I kept sending them back to keep working. And at the time, no one told me that I shouldn't pay them if they screwed up the work. I kept paying them, and people, at that point, I created an incentive for them not to finish on time because they're being paid overtime by me to finish late, right? So at some point in the summer, I had about a dozen jobs left. By the way, by that point, I couldn't sell at all. I couldn't close an estimate to save my life. I didn't believe anymore. I had a dozen jobs or so left, and I fired everyone. And my plan was I'm just going to finish myself. I'll paint all these homes, and at least I'll do it right, and I'll feel a pride of doing it well. And there was an elderly lady who hired me to paint her carport, just the ceiling. It was a nothing job, and she also asked me to power wash her back deck. And power washing was not really part of my portfolio, but she was a nice little lady, and she asked me to do it, and so I said I would. I rented a power washer, and I came to her house. It was late. My days were starting at 6 a.m., ending at 8:30, basically right when it got dark. I got there around 6:30, thinking, painting the carport ceiling would take me 30 minutes. It did, and then I'll power wash her deck and get out of there. And I started power washing her deck, and I remember vividly that I was really impressed by how much grime was coming out of the deck. It was really looking good. And then at some point, the power wash started sputtering, and I realized it was running low on fuel. Now it was her home was 3 stories, and so there was a basement, and the deck started in the basement and kind of went up to the second story. So it was a 2-story deck. I went underneath where I put the power washer. I had snaked the power washer cord through. I went down to refill the fuel, and I refilled the fuel, but I forgot to turn off the power washer, and I spilled some, and the power washer blew up. I'm talking like Roadrunner type blow up, right? Blowing me 30 feet in the air in a second to the back of her yard, where I hit her fence full force. And as I get up, and literally I was seeing stars like in the cartoons, I realized there's a 25-foot bonfire through this woman's deck. I'm literally burning down her house. Okay. So I'm running around to the front. I'm frantic, and as I get to the front, she opens the door. I'm ringing the doorbell like crazy. She sees me, and she just staggers back as if she's seen a ghost. And what I hadn't realized is how badly I had been burned. I suffered severe burns in my arms, my legs, my face, and I had to be helicoptered to the hospital from a soccer field near her home.
Oh,
And so, yes, quite literally, I blew up. And to add insult to injury, the entire summer I was touting College Pro Painter's $1 million liability policy, and I would literally say to people, I could burn down your house and we'd build your new house. And as it turns out, because I was power washing and not painting, and that was not covered by the policy, and so they wouldn't actually replace this woman's deck. And so my only option was to sell my car and rebuild her deck, which is what I did. And so I didn't end up going back to live on campus. I never lived on campus again. Actually, after that, I moved back home. But I did at least rebuild this poor woman's deck. So after that experience, I got to tell you, I thought I would never, ever, ever do anything entrepreneurial again. I mean, I was severely depressed for months, and really struggled with everything that had happened. Plus, I kept having flashbacks of a power washer blowing up in my face. But you know what? It's an experience. I tell the story now. People tend to find it amusing, and so do I, frankly. And it kind of shows that even the hardest moments in our lives, the ones that seem so searing, like at that moment, you just can't imagine that you'll ever be able to look back at something and say, you know what? At least it's a story, and here I am. I look back at that story now, and I no longer feel the pain of it. I no longer feel the shame of it. To me, it's now just a part of my history, just something that, is a part of the amalgam of things that have made me who I am.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm sorry that you got hurt. That blows. I'm
Literally.
glad that you're
Yeah.
glad that you're back to being feeling normal and 100% and all that, which is wonderful. Kudos to you for actually having the respect of her as a customer to do whatever you could to make it right. Even though it's easy for the insurance company to say, oh, screw you, you were power washing, you weren't painting, we're not covering anything. Good on you for following through. You're a college kid. I don't know. I don't know if every college kid would have sold their car just to, fix her deck. So that was very kind of you. So it shows a lot about your character. What going through that, like first entrepreneurial journey, I can't think of a much worse foundation to start from. So what did you do mentally? Like what work did you do on yourself to make that shift to where you were okay doing a risk like that again?
To be honest with you, I wish I had some thoughtful answer to that. The truth is I was very young, and I had no intention of getting into business again. I ended up being pulled into a new family business that my brothers and father co-founded and brought me in as a co-founder of. They both had newspaper distribution businesses separately from each other. I was working for both. I was delivering papers for both of them. And they ended up getting this great opportunity to take on the circulation of a very large regional newspaper. And the family needed to get on board because the opportunity was too big to pass up on. And so I was asked to drop out of school and come join the family business. I was finishing my junior year, and it took me years, by the way, to go back and finish my degree. I did ultimately finish my degree at the University of Maryland, but I took a break, and I joined this newspaper distribution business, which at the time, seemed like a stepping stone to something else. Like as a family, we had talked about, buying real estate and or gas stations. That was the big dream, right? The immigrant dream. We're going to own gas stations. But yeah, this newspaper business started. I came into it, bottom of the totem pole. I was making the least. I had the least responsibilities. I was fortunate to have, a father and two brothers that were very loving. And, my oldest brother has got the work ethic of 10 people. And my other brother is extremely, he's just enterprising, and was very good with, he's accountant and computer scientist. So he was able to build systems, and I ended up initially, kind of just filling the gaps, doing whatever I could. And, this business ended up becoming a very large business over the next 20 years, ended up operating in 33 states. We had thousands of associates, tens of thousands of customers, revenues in the substantial revenues, tens of millions. And I eventually became the CEO. And, I couldn't tell you how that journey happened. It just did. It turned out that, I had a skill selling, particularly when I believed in things. I was fortunate to have brothers who could execute. And so I believed in them. And so I was selling them and their abilities and the team we ended up building. And as they say, the rest is history. I mean, we built those businesses, learned a lot along the way, made tons of mistakes.
Sure.
But ultimately, those businesses were large enough to sell. By the time we sold them, we had actually split the business into two. We had a newspaper distribution business, which was one of the largest in the country. We had a magazine, book, and licensed merchandise and DVDs business that was also very large. We sold that business to Hudson News. We sold the newspaper business to our partners, NNA, and moved on to other bigger and better things. So, the experience, I would say, I wish I could tell you how I persevered, or I just survived. And, I moved on and, carried on with some degree of enthusiasm and energy, and things worked out. But trust me, there were plenty of setbacks along the way. I don't want to make it seem like anything other than what it was, which was a very bumpy ride.
Sure. Well, is that bumpy ride because of it being a family business?
Oh, that was a part. Yeah. I mean, there's no question that there was, there was conflict among us. And, ultimately my oldest brother ended up leaving and starting his own very successful business. And he's doing exceptionally well now. I'm very proud of him and what he's accomplished. Hanan, my middle brother, and I, we stayed, ran the business together, and then founded iControl together, and, carried on until I ended up leaving iControl in 2021 when I resigned as CEO. I mean, Hanan was still there. My father was there and was involved in the businesses, and he ended up retiring. So there was absolute challenges. Look, the biggest challenge of a family business is the fact that people allow themselves to offend their family members in ways they probably wouldn't offend people who aren't family members. So we were, back in those days, we were rude to each other. We would say terrible things to each other. We would be mean to each other. We would raise our voices at each other in ways that, generally speaking, we didn't do with other people. And I look back at that, and again, it made me who I am. I don't really have a bunch of regrets, because I don't know that regret is a very useful emotion. But I can tell you that I have learned so much about life since that point, and I believe that the way we handled ourselves back then probably held us back. We still ended up succeeding, but we probably succeeded less than we may have if we had had healthier ways of communicating with each other and more respect for each other. And we probably would have burned ourselves and some other people less along the way, right? We just didn't have the right mindset. We didn't have the right appreciation for what matters in life when we were young and very ambitious. And I think that's true for a lot of entrepreneurs. Again, I don't know if life could have turned out very differently. Maybe if we had had the mindset that I have now, which is more about collaboration and love, the business would have failed. Maybe the business needed what it had at the time. I don't know. And that's why I don't really think about it with too much regret. I do think ultimately that, the way we did it was, at least, if nothing else, it caused us pain, caused some harm, caused some damage to our relationship with one another. And that's regrettable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's your experience is not unique in that, right? Like you hear about that a lot with family businesses. I currently own a franchise with my wife, and luckily we are able to work really well together because she's family that I chose, right? So I don't have the years of growing up and, hey, my brother did this to my favorite collection of whatever, right? I don't have a lot of that back history. And we also tend to always show gratitude towards each other on pretty much everything. So it makes it a little bit easier. So that having that mindset of making sure that your relationship isn't entwined with the business, I think helps out a lot, for sure. You mentioned Hanan and working with iControl and everything that you built there and stepping back and all that. But you've also been like with, obviously the Park Mobile and the Jet Pillow, and like what motivates you to delve into like all these super disparate kind of businesses, and like r.love where we met. I mean, not romantically, but we met. Like r.love,
Let's
like
not tell people the truth.
but like how do you your fingers are across many different spectrums. What drives that?
Well, look, for starters, I actually give a lot of credit to the environment I was in. My brother, Hanan, is a very curious guy. And the mobile parking business was actually a business he brought back from a trip to Israel, I believe, maybe Europe, I forget. He had seen it over there. He came back and said, we could do it. We had just started iControl Data at the same time. We started the two companies essentially around the same time. We'd sold our distribution business to Hudson News, and when we did, we thought we had a really good idea for how to build technology to streamline the way folks like us in the wholesale distribution business and retailers did business with each other. And so we innovated, we created a technology, started off pretty quickly and took off. And concurrently, we started this mobile parking business because, initially our thinking was we're going to be a financial technology company. And so it seemed like it fit. But we did recruit a board of directors that was made up of almost entirely of the retail world. We had some significant CEOs and presidents of or retired presidents of major grocery chains and drugstore chains and manufacturers. And naturally, they gravitated toward that business. And so, after a couple of years of running the two businesses, both of them working well, we launched a couple of cities with what was then iControl Mobile. And we reached a point where the board felt like we should concentrate on one business because both were doing well. And we ended up making the decision, and again, no regrets. It was what it was. We made the decision to sell the parking business, the parking payment business. Ringo at the time, Ringo still the name they operate in the UK. Now it's Park Mobile, but Ringo made the winning bid, and we sold the business to them. It was a good exit, quick, and we didn't get crazy rich, but it was a nice exit. iControl Data, kind of took a life of its own and ended up becoming a pretty substantial enterprise over the next decade or so. And so, again, no regrets. And there as well. I mean, I did have the original idea for iControl Data. It was my idea to build that technology, but my brother built the technology along with a very talented team of people around him, including my first cousin, Gilad Karen, who was our CTO and is to this day the CTO of iControl. A super talented guy. So we had incredible people, and we had incredible people and good fortune. Those things oftentimes go hand in hand, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I was going to ask about like, how do you do two businesses at once? Like, wouldn't you be super stretched thin?
Yeah, it wasn't easy, especially given I was I had, I was married young. I had two daughters, and then I was a single dad. Then remarried, and my second wife was busy herself. She was a federal attorney and had a busy career. How you do it? I got to tell you, PJ, there's something about being young that that gives you some sort of superpowers that you don't have when you're our age, right? I mean, I honestly can't answer that question anymore. I don't know how I did it. I mean, I'm still doing a lot, but it's nowhere near what I was doing then. And it's really not clear to me how I did it. I'm sure it wasn't the most healthy way to be. A lot of my life at the time was about my career, and I have regrets about how present I was for my kids. My kids have been incredibly kind. I have an incredible relationship with all of them. They're all adults now. But they've told me I was very present, in fact, maybe too much. But I actually recall not being that present. And even when I was present, I oftentimes was distracted, right? So it's kind of the entrepreneurial story. You do too much, you make sacrifices. Oftentimes the sacrifices you make are not ones you fully appreciate until later on in life.
Yep.
And that was my story.
So true. Yeah. Because, you say you don't know how you did it. Well, you just did it because it had to be done, right? Like that was the situation you're in when you're young. You have the energy and you have less things holding you back, i.e. experience and knowledge. So you don't overthink
for sure.
You just gotta push through it. That's incredible, really, actually. You have been one of the things that I've enjoyed so much about this podcast and about working with you on, through all these discussions we've had with truly remarkable people. You've always been very transparent about failure, about being humble, about trying to bring love, so to speak, into the workplace, right? Not, the love in regards to just being open and vulnerable and humble and wanting to help out your fellow people, right? Can you, and you've also mentioned before about how there's a need to reframe when there's a setback, right? Because obviously there are setbacks that we all have had. What do you, in your words, what does reframing really mean? And like, how does that, in your personal experience, how has reframing helped you?
Well, I again, the credit doesn't come. The credit's not mine. You know, the concept of a reframe, you know, goes to a couple people in my life. One of them was my therapist, and the reason that this came up was because I had suffered a massive setback in 2020 with eye control that cost me and the company a ton of money. And I was really reeling from that. And you know, my initial reaction was to feel like a victim. And my story was a story of victimhood. And you know, my therapist listened to me tell my story, and he said, "Okay, well, you know what, Tal? That's the truth. I'm not saying anything you said isn't true, but I also believe that's not the only truth. I think there's more that you could choose to see in what took place. And if you frame it where you are the hero of the story and not the victim, you might have a different perspective." And he challenged me to tell the story again, but this time from a different perspective, essentially reframe the story. And so, you know, I went from, well, I mean, the truth is I lost tens of millions of dollars, and not just for myself, but for a lot of people. And I felt very guilty about that. You know, it wasn't my fault per se. We lost the lawsuit, but I was the CEO. It was on my watch, right?
Yeah,
And
sure.
and I cost a lot of people I cared about um, a lot of money, or at least I felt that way. And the reframe of that story was that, you know what, I wasn't alone. There was a board of directors, including Goldman Sachs and other very talented people that were part of the process of selecting the law firm that represented us. And uh, you know, there was an opportunity to settle the case, which we didn't accept. Again, it wasn't a solo decision. And beyond that, I took pride in how I handled myself once bad things happened. I had in some respects I had no choice, right? The business, it happened that we lost the lawsuit immediately the week before the country shut down due to COVID. That
Oh,
created some difficult realities when it comes to funding. We had an acquisition that was scheduled to close, and that did not happen, of course. And finding ways to do the right things was challenging. And my options were, you know, I was obviously represented at that point, getting a lot of advice from lawyers, including someone that was representing me, because as a CEO, I potentially faced lawsuits myself. You know, the advice I was given is, you know, you've got to do what you got to do to save the business. Anything that you could do to prevent bankruptcy, you need to do, even if it means, you know, total ruination of your own value in the business. Whatever you've built might need to be sacrificed. And you know, ultimately, as I shifted my thinking and looked at the story differently, I stopped seeing villains. I started realizing that actually everyone acted in good faith. Everyone did the very best they could in a difficult situation. And the outcome was the business was saved, jobs were saved. You know, I did, at the time that we lost the lawsuit, have to furlough a good number of people and cut pay, including myself. And I remember being extraordinarily transparent about it. You know, I'd called a company call. We had staff all over the country and overseas, and I told everyone the truth. I said, you know, I really cannot predict what's going to happen. I don't know if we're going to fail. We may. Customers may choose to leave us. We're a payment company that, you know, is facing financial difficulty. And we did lose some customers, although the business is doing well. The business is thriving, and I'm very proud of the team that's there now and leading it every day, including the CEO, my good friend, Matt Gutermuth. But, you know, ultimately, I had to face the music. Something happened and it was bad. And the reframe was accepting that what happened happened. It was what needed to happen. It was the trajectory of my life. And what I could do is cry myself a river or learn how to get up, brush myself off, and do something positive with my life.
right.
So that was the choice I ultimately made. It wasn't easy. You know, I could tell you there were many, many, many dark moments. I was very depressed. It in many ways was similar to the blow up, you know, that took place 25 years earlier. But you know, ultimately, I chose to get up and carry on. And I realized at some point that there was no shame in having had setbacks because I'm not alone. I received a lot of love and support from a lot of people, including people who lost money, and didn't blame me for it, and they felt that my blaming myself for it was ridiculous.
Sure.
And that was very kind of them, quite frankly, because you know what, they could have definitely taken a different perspective on that. So ultimately, you know, I think the reframe is you choose the story you tell, and you can be the victim or you could be the hero. And you know what? It's a lot more fun to be the hero. And so that's my answer.
You know that, I mean, that's, first of all, thank you for sharing. That's fascinating. I have actually been known to say quite often, everyone's the hero of their own story, right?
They
Uh,
can be.
they
They have to
can be,
choose to be.
right. And so it's more of a general statement, but when you're talking about the need for reframing through adversity, when something bad happens, I've owned companies in the past. I had one that did spectacularly well and then died almost overnight. And so that was, to be so uniquely tied to the company where I was doing everything, and spent so many years building it up, and then to have it through no fault of my own. You know, I had nothing to do with it on why it failed, but for it to crash, and then that sense of self gets dragged down with it, right? And it's really hard to, you know, I went to my own therapist and talked about it and tried to figure it out, and I think your therapist was a little more helpful. Mine was good, you know, but you know, she'd be like, "Oh, well, aren't you proud about this and aren't you proud about that?" And I'd be like, "No, because I failed." Right? And at the end of the day, if there's, is it pass or fail? It failed, right? And so it was a very hard thing for me to swallow and for me to deal with. And then I was, you know, I resigned myself to being, all right, I'm just going to go back into the corporate world, and I'm going to do what I've done for, you know, a good part of my career. I've always been extremely successful at it. I'll just do that. And it's all great, but I think the reframing would have helped a lot. You know, I think I've done that slowly, unconsciously, maybe over the past, been almost 18 years now. Um, but to have that in your toolkit, I think is very important as someone who wants to be an entrepreneur, because adversity is coming. It's not, if,
Adversity is there. I mean,
yeah.
adversity is, you know, is always at the door's edge. And yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a great tool. There have been others, you know, and again, as I look back, the reframe is getting easier actually, because I see myself, and it's been, you know, it's going on 3 years. I've reinvented myself in some ways, and professionally, but maybe most importantly, personally. Um, I've I've modified and improved how I approach myself and life. I've learned the importance of being very gentle with myself first and foremost, and how that manifests in my relationships with others. I learned a lot about you know, about dealing with trauma, and the fact that if you don't fully process your trauma, it's going to resurface in different ways, and oftentimes ways that are not going to be the ways you want to show up. You know, and I've come to appreciate how important awareness is, self-awareness, um, and um, the work that I do, and I do it every day to stay mindful and aware, is work I'm very proud of. And I think that, you know, who knows what my life would have been like had I kept, you know, down the path I was on. I think I'm healthier and happier and better adjusted. That's not to say there aren't difficult days. There are, lately in some respects more than others, but all in all, I look at my life, I look at, you know, the last several years, and I feel tremendous joy. And I think that that's the reframe right there, right? I mean, because it's hard to feel joy when, you know, your net worth has gone down. Lots of zeros are gone off your net worth. But you know, I've stopped valuing myself based on that. I've started valuing myself based on my relationships, based on how I show up in the world, based on how I make people feel.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, there's an old. Let me ask you a question. Do you have a personal do you have a personal motto or a favorite quote?
I have lots. I actually have something that's hung over my desk. It says, "Wisdom is oftentimes acquired when we stumble, not when we succeed. Our defeats leave us wiser than our triumphs. By faith we live, by love we serve, by patience we understand, by trials we gain wisdom, by sharing we give joy. Keep going, keep caring, and always trust God." And that, I would say, is pretty much the sum of how I feel.
That's that's pretty remarkable. That was awesome. Shut me up. That was awesome. I was gonna say
Dang, should I drop the mic? I mean, it's too expensive. The mic that I got is too expensive,
I
so I'm
know
not going
that's
to
a nice
drop it.
mic.
But
I'll drop it.
yeah, thank you.
I was going to say that my personal motto or my favorite motto is, and there's many different ways to say this, or it's been said many different ways, but the one that I know is from the Maasai, the tribe out of Africa, which is you are what you do when it counts, right? You got to show up when it counts, and everything else, don't worry about being measured by that, you know. And I think that it's one of the statements that you just made about not being valued by zeros, right? That's not your value. Your children don't look at you with a price tag. Your friends don't look at you with a price tag. The people that you love, or more importantly, the people that love you, don't look at you with a price tag. It's who you are, how you present, how you show up, and what effect you have on their lives through honesty and openness and caring and love. That's what really matters.
I think that's true. Maybe with two exceptions. I think my financial planner probably feels a little worse about me losing zeros. Um, and yeah, possibly my accountant as well. But yeah, other than those two, I would agree.
And me too. Well, actually, because I was going to ask you if I could borrow some money after this, but anyway, that's a whole other thing. Look, some of the knowledge you just dropped is awesome. We'll kind of close out with this one. So, you know, we've talked about the reframing. We've talked about being mindful that you mentioned that we talked about the love for oneself, right? Being kind to yourself and speaking well to yourself. How do you integrate those principles into your leadership style or the strategies you have for business? And with this podcast, what is one piece of advice that you would give, that you would like a burgeoning entrepreneur or someone who's thinking about, you know, dipping their toe into this pond? What would you like for them to walk away from this podcast with?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. So, I mean, I think for starters, my leadership style has evolved dramatically, right? We've talked to some guests, and we generally share this commonality, which is in our earlier years professionally, we were, you know, tyrants. I was certainly a tyrant, and I allowed myself to offend liberally. If I felt someone let me down, you know, when I was young, I'd allow myself to disrespect them. And I look back at that with, you know, with regret. I think that, you know, I did not, well, again, I don't want to spend too much time on regret because it's, you know, as I said, it's not the most useful emotion, but it does motivate me today and every day to try to be the best version of myself that I can be. And so, you know, I have the privilege right now of working, you know, as a senior principal at Infosys, which is a giant global tech consulting firm and a great company. And they've put me in charge of a great contract managing a big rollout for Fortune 500 company. And in this project, I have the opportunity to work with some terrific colleagues at Infosys from India and from Mexico, a client that's global and has just absolutely fabulous people here in the United States, in Canada, in Mexico, and elsewhere, and vendors that are there are main vendors, main companies based in Germany, and the colleagues that we're dealing with are in Canada mainly. And in this project, I've felt most at peace because even when things are difficult, and you know, there's no big project that doesn't have tough moments, I felt that I was behaving in a way that I'm proud of. And you know, this has evolved. I would say that, you know, in the early days, a couple of years back, I still allowed myself to offend, less so than before. Now I don't. Now I really take pride in, you know, being respectful recognizing that people are, well, to state the obvious, they're human. They have a life, they have families, they have other responsibilities. Everyone, generally speaking, tries their best within their means. And as a leader, my role is not to beat people up, not to win at all costs, meaning, if I cause a lot of hardship and heartache to people along the way, then, the ends justify the means. I don't believe that the ends justify the means. I think you need to find a way to balance the end and the means. And so my leadership style today is about championing. It's about mentoring. It's about helping people grow. If at the end of this project and any other project I'm ever involved in, people look back and they say, you know what I learned from Tal? I learned to be kind. I learned to be humble. I learned to be respectful. And yes, we also succeeded in pulling off, a nice feat of technological advancement.
Sure.
Then I would be much more proud than if it was just the latter and not the former.
Yeah.
In terms of what I would love for people to walk away from this episode and others, it would be the following. I think that first, you've talked and you've mentioned, and it's because you've heard me say it, that I think it's really important that we are kind and gentle with ourselves. This is something I'm working on every day, and I'm getting better at it every day. We are, generally speaking, not just our worst critics, we're also the rudest to ourselves. It's one thing to be a critic, it's another to be a jerk.
I'm
And
an
we're
asshole.
often really, yeah, well, a lot of people are assholes to themselves, right? And I was no exception. I was very tough on myself, particularly when, decisions I made or things that I led did not pan out. I oftentimes was infuriated with myself and beat myself up. And, I've learned that you just can't do that. If you want to live a life of purpose, and you want to be able to impact people, you need to first respect yourself and hold yourself in high regard, and recognize that your humanity means that you may have screwed something up. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you deserve scorn. What you deserve is to be kind to yourself. And that's what I try to do, right? So my lesson, if I could convey anything to people that are listening or watching that I think hopefully will impact their lives, is start by being very gentle with yourself. And the harder you work, the more entrepreneurial you are, the more opportunities you're going to have to beat yourself up. And let me promise you something, because I've done it. I did it for years. I did it for decades. It will be the moment that you stop doing that, that's going to be your moment of triumph. Until that moment, you're going to be struggling in ways that you don't fully appreciate because you're not able to appreciate it. It's when you stop this merry-go-round of self-abuse and abuse of others that you really find peace. And, success and wealth are awesome, but peace is what it's all about.
Yeah.
So that would be, that's what I hope people walk away from this with.
That's awesome. Tal, you are off the hot seat, my friend.
Well, thank you.
No, this is
be off it.
Yeah. Well, no, this is a great journey. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, we've interviewed some fantastic people, and we got more on the docket. So I'm looking forward to delving into all this with you. Thank you for sharing your insight and your thoughts and your humanity and who you are, because I think it's important for people to understand where the questions are coming from, where the intent is, and what we're trying to achieve with this little podcast in the world. So thank you. And looking forward to, many more episodes of just awesomeness.
Me as well. I think it's going to be fun. And even more importantly, I think it's going to have an impact. So
yeah,
it's going to be worthwhile because people's lives will change. And that motivates me. That gets me out of bed in the morning.
Absolutely, brother. Well, thank you very much. And I'll see you in the next episode.
Sounds great. Thank you.